I call to order the meeting of the Pasadena Independent School District Board of Trustees in special called session on Monday, November 20th, 2017, in the boardroom of the Administration Building, 1515 Cherry Brook, Pasadena, Texas, 5:37 p.m. Board members present are Mr. Jack Bailey, Mrs. Nelda Sullivan, Ms. Maricel Chiano, Mr. Fred Roberts, Mr. Marshall Kendrick, and myself, Vicki Morgan. Board members absent, Mr. Kenny Fernandez. Let the record indicate that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting is duly called, and that notice of the meeting was posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. The invocation will be given by Mr. Fred Roberts and the pledges by Mrs. Nelda Sullivan. Will you please stand?
Okay, if you'd bow your head, please. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for a wonderful district. We want to thank you for a wonderful day and all the sunshine you brought us. And thank you, me personally, thank you for these board members that give of their time and think things out and do things right for our students, our educators, our support staff. Thank you for our support staff that is always willing to go that extra mile. And we've got a special day coming up on Thursday, and that day for me is I want to specifically thank you for the things in my life and the things in my friends' lives and all the great things that happen around us. Protect those that are overseas and are fighting for our freedom and for the American way. Now I ask you to give us wisdom and direction. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Would you please face the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
I'm going to, we do need an executive session. Okay. The board is going to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551 for the purpose, 551.074 for the purpose of considering the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee, or to hear complaints or charges against a public officer or employee. 551.071 to consult with district's attorneys concerning matters on which the attorney's duty of the district under the Code of Professional Responsibility clearly conflicts with the Texas Open Meetings Act. When the district seeks the advice of its attorney about pending or contemplated litigation or a settlement offer. 551.072 for the purpose of discussing the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, and will reconvene in open session shortly. The board is reconvening from closed session. Next on the agenda is consideration and possible approval of an order canvassing returns and declaring results of the bond election. Mr. Joyner?
Thank you, ma'am. I'm going to read this order to you. Order canvassing returns and declaring results of bond election. Whereas there was held in the Pasadena Independent School District on the 7th day of November 2017 an election at which there was submitted to all duly qualified resident electors of the district for their action thereon the following proposition: the issuance of $135 million bonds for the construction, acquisition, and equipment of school buildings in the district, including rehabilitation, renovation, expansion, and improvement thereof, and the purchase of the necessary sites for school buildings and the purchase of new school buses and the levying of a tax in payment thereof. And whereas there were cast at the election 3,927 for passage and 1,094 against passage. And that is for the results of the bond election, Madam President.
Thank you very much. Do I hear a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mr. Kendrick, seconded by Mr. Roberts. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, motion carries. Where's Miss Sullivan?
I think she went to the laboratory.
Okay. Do we want to wait? Or do you-
Karen's going to check on her.
Okay. Let's wait just a second. I saw her chair turned around. Did we vote on this? Did we vote?
Ask Marshall, ask him, it's all right, I'm the timekeeper.
Oh,
Does he need a code? Does he need a code to get in?
no.
I remember it.
You know all my passwords.
Both of them. Thanks.
While we're waiting for Ms. Sullivan, you also have at your place by precinct as
I
well.
saw that.
So
There she is. I'm sorry, Nelda, your chair was turned around. I thought you were here. Okay, next is consideration and possible approval of the order canvassing results and declaring results of tax ratification election. And Mr. Joyner is going to read this for us as well.
Thank you, Madam President. This is order canvassing returns and declaring results of a tax ratification election. Whereas there was held in the Pasadena Independent School District on the 7th day of November 2017, an election at which there was submitted to all duly qualified resident electors of the district for their action thereon, a tax ratification election, and whereas there were cast at the election 3,355 for passage and 1,659 against.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Sullivan, seconded by Mr. Roberts. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, motion carries. Any comments to be made at this point in time?
Hooray.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you to our community.
That's right.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, next is consideration and possible consideration of Level 3 employee complaint presentation from TSTA on behalf of Pasadena Educators Association and related actions. And let me get to mine. At this time, we're taking up the agenda item related to the Level 3 grievance filed by the Texas State Teachers Association on behalf of the Pasadena Educators Association, also referred to as PEA. Good evening. It's now 6:30 p.m. on November 20th, 2017. The purpose of this meeting is to consider the Level 3 complaint of the PEA. This complaint relates to whether the Pasadena ISD Transportation Department is required by the Fair Labor Standards Act to pay its employees to attend voluntary meetings at which employees bid on field trip driving opportunities. Specifically, PEA is appealing a decision made on October the 3rd, 2017 by Kevin Fornoff, the Associate Superintendent of Facilities and Construction, and the Level 2 hearing officer on this complaint. The board's objective tonight is to hear from Amanda Moore with the Texas State Teachers Association of TSTA, as well as from the school administration concerning the complaints of PEA. Since Ms. Moore initiated this proceeding on PEA's behalf, By requesting a presentation before the board, she will have the responsibility of presenting her claims to the board and convincing the board that PEA has been wronged as stated in the complaint and that PEA is entitled to the relief they are seeking. The board has the final authority to determine the facts related to this issue and make a decision at the conclusion of the proceeding. In doing so, the board may decide the facts and interpret and imply board policies related to the allegations. Before we get started, I'm going to ask each board member to introduce themselves and state whether he or she is able to hear the presentation and render a fair decision. So let's start with Ms. Kiana.
Marisol Quijano, board member. Yes, I am.
Marshall Kendrick, board member, yes.
Jack Bailey, board member, yes.
Nelda Sullivan, board member, yes.
Fred Roberts, yes.
And I am Vicki Morgan, board president, and I am as well. It is the board's understanding that PEA will be represented tonight by attorney Amanda Moore with TSTA, and that the Pasadena ISD administration will be represented by Pasadena ISD school lawyers Mr. David Hodgins and Rebecca Bailey.
She was not able to be here
okay.
tonight.
No, Madam President, Ms. Bailey could not be here tonight due to illness, but David Hodgins will be honored to represent.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Hodgins. Both the administration and Ms. Moore will be given an opportunity to present witnesses, testimony, argument, and information with respect to the issues and in support of their respective position. This will be conducted as an informal hearing, and no strict rules of evidence will apply. However, all testimony should be relevant to the area of concern and related consequences. This hearing will be based on the record from the Level 1 and Level 2 and any related argument. The board has been provided a copy of the Level 1 and Level 2 record. The board shall consider only those issues presented at the proceeding level and identified in the appeal notice. Anyone who speaks to the board will do so through Amanda Moore or the administration or its representative. All statements and presentations should be limited to the issue contained in the Level 3 notice. In order to provide an accurate record of this proceeding, a court reporter is present tonight to make a record of this proceeding. Please avoid talking when others are speaking so that the court reporter will be able to adequately record the proceeding. Please speak loudly enough to be heard. No cross-examination by the parties is allowed. However, members of the board may question Ms. Moore or the administration at any time. I would note at this time it's not the board's intention to ask questions, if any, until the conclusion of the respective presentation. Members of the board are not subject to questioning by the presenter. Ms. Moore, for the record, will you please introduce who's present with you tonight?
Yes, thank you. My name is Amanda Moore, and I'm an attorney for TSTA.
I think you're going to have to get closer. Pull it to you, please.
How's that?
That's better.
Okay, great. This is Miss Sonia Emmons. She is a bus driver with Pasadena ISD, has been with you for 7 years. And this is Miss Dardan Hayter. She is one of our advocates here for PEA and for TSTA.
And can you hear?
Yeah, maybe a little bit louder.
Yeah, you need to be a little bit louder.
I promise I won't break out the song.
Mr. Hodgins, for the record, will you please introduce who's present with you tonight?
Yes, thank you, Madam President, board members, Madam Superintendent David Hodgins. On behalf of the administration, with me tonight is General Counsel Jody Kimmerer, Associate Superintendent Kevin Carnall, as well as Jim Bob Jacobs, the Assistant Director for Transportation for Pasadena ISD.
Ms. Moore, you'll have up to 30 minutes to make your presentation. In your presentation, please identify your specific complaints and any and all relief you request related to your complaints. Following your presentation, the administration will have up to 30 minutes to make its presentation. After the administration has presented their information, Ms. Moore, you may take 5 minutes to make whatever rebuttal closing statements you may wish to the board. The administration then will have up to 5 minutes to to present whatever closing statements they wish the board to consider. I've asked Mr. Jack Bailey if he will be our timekeeper, so he'll keep up with the time. He'll let you know when you've got 5 minutes left on the 30-minute presentation and then when your time's up. Okay. At this time, Ms. Moore, you may proceed with your presentation.
Thank you. Madam President and members of the board, good evening. As stated before, my name is Amanda Moore, and I represent the Pasadena Educators Association. This grievance is filed regarding Pasadena ISD Transportation Department's ongoing practice of requiring bus drivers to clock out before they bid on field trips for the Pasadena Independent School District. In the summary that was stated by Madam President, the word voluntary was used. And we have issue with that specific term, and we will speak with you about it. On April 12, 2017, the Pasadena ISD Transportation Department held a meeting whereby employees would clock out to bid on field trips. The meeting is always held during the business day. These meetings are directly related to their employment and pertain to PISD district business. Our members have not been compensated for their attendance at these meetings. PEA believes that this practice is a violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Under the Code of Federal Regulations 785.27, there are 4 criteria that must all be met for it not to be compensable time. In your materials, it's at page 137. And it states that attendance at lectures, meetings, training programs, and similar activities need not be counted as working time if the following 4 criteria are met. Attendance is outside of the employee's regular working hours. Attendance is in fact voluntary. The course, lecture, or meeting is not directly related to the employee's job, and the employee does not perform any productive work during such attendance. What you will see in your materials at page 139, in the second paragraph, it says, attendance at lectures, meetings, training programs, and similar activities need not be counted as working time only if 4 criteria are met. All of these requirements must be met in order for the Transportation Department not to pay their employees. It's outside normal hours, it is voluntary, not job-related, and no other work is concurrently being performed. The field trip meeting takes place during working hours. The administration has not denied that. Now, they would like to say that because a bus driver may have a route early in the morning and then they can go to a meeting at 9:15, but there are other bus drivers who may have a route during the time of the meeting. So this meeting does take place during the working hours of many employees in the department. This meeting is not voluntary. Under the Code of Federal Regulations, and you'll see on page 137, if you're still there, under 785.28, it says, it is not voluntary. In fact, if the employee is given to understand or led to believe that his present working conditions or the continuance of his employment will be adversely affected by non-attendance. One of the rules of the field trip meeting is that you have to be present. And the only time you can use what they call a proxy is if you would otherwise be working at the time. So if you're sick or you have a family member that's sick and you cannot attend the field trip meeting, you cannot request a proxy. You miss out on the opportunity for extra compensation that will be granted to other employees. Field trips are available in the district, but employees, this is a lot of the only time they can earn additional salary outside what they usually make. They are highly sought after and valued by the employees of the district. A bus driver's working conditions will be adversely affected if they are unable to attend or send a person in their place to bid for them. Based on this current system, as I stated, an employee could have seniority and be unable to attend the meeting, or if they do attend, they will not be compensated. Field trips are directly related to what bus drivers do on a daily and weekly basis for the district. In your materials, you have an opinion that we found with the Department of Labor, and it's at page 227. And in this opinion, we used an example. There's an example of nurses, and it's a case in which nurses participated in activities possibly to obtain higher pay. On the second page of this opinion, the administrator for the U.S. Department of Labor said that the nurses cannot classify these activities as volunteer services when they are performed under the direction and control of their employer. The field trips are directly controlled by the Pasadena Independent School District's Transportation Department. The time spent in such, well, that's my statement, but the time spent in such activities is compensable work time when it is subject to the control of a hospital. It also says that it would seem particularly inappropriate to consider the time spent at patient care conferences and task force meetings as non-compensable volunteer time when that activity seems to be closely related to the nurse's normal duties. So what's the point of this? This is not just a regular meeting to see if you want to volunteer to participate with a YMCA activity. This is not a volunteer group of something outside of what bus drivers do. This is a meeting in which there are people present who are being compensated. In your materials that we have, and I'll get the specific page for you, here's page 123. The PISD employees...
Hold on 1 second.
Wait, yeah,
Let me get to 123. You talk faster than I turn pages.
Thank you, sir. On page 123, you'll see the list of Pasadena ISD employees who are compensated when they attend the field trip meetings. Mr. Jim Jacobs, Ms. Claudette Thomas, Marissa Bueno, Cindy Heidke, Alma Munoz, and Araceli Lopez. All of these people are compensated during these field trip meetings. The only people who are not compensated are the bus drivers. We believe that our members should be compensated while attending these meetings. The administration has not met all of the criteria. These meetings are directly related to PISD business. They're not voluntary, and this is part we wanted to mention before, in that if a person, yes, they can come and go as they please, but if they leave, they will not get a field trip. If they aren't able to attend, they will not get a field trip. And one of the things that have been brought up to our members is the issue of pay, is that the administration simply can't afford to pay employees to attend these meetings. But our bus drivers are paid an amount between $10 and $20 an hour. And the people who are being allowed to be at these meetings, they're being compensated just fine. And there hasn't been any argument as to why they should not be paid. There's also an issue here regarding fairness. Under Pasadena ISD board policies, employees are to be treated fairly and equally. An employee should not be penalized if he or she cannot find an individual to go in their place to a meeting. They cannot miss their route in order to attend, or they will likely be terminated. This is and was an unfair practice that needs to end. Individuals who cannot be present or who do not have a proxy are not receiving the same privileges and benefits as other employees. The members of PEA have been financially harmed by the actions of the department. One of the things that we've been willing to discuss, and you probably see many information or tapes that you reviewed from our previous hearings, is that we are open to discuss other methods and ways in which the employees can be compensated during this meeting, or perhaps another procedure that is fair to all. Now, there was a procedure that was used when these meetings were suspended, and it was a rolling seniority list. And many of the members were fine with that because the issue for them is for seniority to take place, but also to be fair and transparent to all people. Now, the administration will likely argue that it's an open meeting. Everyone loves it. You can see that there's no problem. There won't be any objection as to whether or not there's favoritism. But the problem is that this is directly related to their jobs. And just because the administration doesn't want to pay them doesn't mean that they shouldn't be. We believe this is a violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act, and our remedies are as follows. We request that PEA members receive any and all compensation lost as a result of their attendance at the field trip meetings. We request that PEA members be compensated while attending any future field trip meetings or other meetings directly related to their employment at PISD. And I'll like to retain any time that I have at a later point, if that's okay.
Well,
We done?
If not, I can just limit it to the 5 minutes you stated earlier.
yeah,
That's fine.
okay. Mr. Hodgins, you may proceed with the administration's position and presentation.
Thank you, board members, for the opportunity to present on behalf of the administration. I would start out and say a couple things. Number one, the administration disagrees completely with the argument that we just heard from a legal standpoint, a policy standpoint, a practicality standpoint, and a fair and transparent standpoint. This administration has worked very, very hard with our very important bus drivers to come up with a system that honors fairness and transparency. One result could be simply the administration, if they elected to, they can make all these decisions without a meeting. They could do it without any particular input from a legal standpoint. This method of volunteering and having a bid process was put in place so that folks could have an opportunity to participate more than they claimed that they were getting, and to eliminate the arguments about favoritism, because it is a meeting that is before everybody, that everyone has an opportunity to participate if they choose to do so. And from an argument standpoint, I mean, we have a large record here, but the good news is that Keith Moore, who could not be here tonight because of illness, worked very hard listening to the level 1 complaint consideration, and took a lot of information from both lawyers on the administrative side, Ms. Moore from her side, to make a very detailed written decision about why this does meet the elements. And I'd like to turn you to that decision because it really forms the administration's persuasive argument tonight, board members. And if you would turn, please, to the record on page 7. Page 7, not too far down. I'm not going to go through all of this, but this really does outline the administration's position. And as you're turning there, particularly turn to page 8 of the decision, and I'll go over a few pieces regarding it, but I do want to emphasize some context. This is not about our bus drivers' regular jobs. That's not what this is about. These aren't meetings about how to do your regular job better. We have dedicated hours to our bus drivers. We pay as competitive salaries we can realistically with the budgetary constraints. And we commit to them from a regular job standpoint, duties and trainings and things of that nature, and we compensate for that consistently. The context here is important. This is about extra duties, extra jobs. You can almost picture it as like applying for a new position to get an extra duty, because that's what's going on here, really. It's simply an application process so that folks can earn the right or the opportunity in a good, systematic way that everybody sees in order to make these decisions that the administration could make on their own if they elected to. And so if you look at the decision, you see on page 8 the very elements that Councilman Moore outlined in the middle of the page regarding the Fair Labor Standards Act. That meetings and trainings and lectures are not to be compensated if the 4 elements there are met, these 4 factors. 1, attendance is outside the employee's regular work hours. 2, attendance is voluntary. 3, the course of meeting is not directly related to the employee's job. And 4, the employee does not perform any productive work during such attendance. We have cases in the record and that were presented to Mr. Moore as well as Mr. Plump supporting the district's position. They're before you. But let's go ahead and just walk through quickly these 4 components, if I may, that's outlined in this decision. The first one is outside the employee's regular work hours. The regular work hours for our bus driving personnel tend to be 5:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. in the morning shift on the whole, and then 1:30 to 4:30 basically in the afternoon shift. These meetings are never held during those time frames. The meeting is generally, first of all, once a week, tends to be right after the first shift is completed. Everyone is to be already clocked out, as they say, in this arena, because their duties of their regular job have been completed. So first of all, it is definitely outside the, quote, regular work hours. Not much dispute about the regular work hours that are out there. Maybe 1 or 2 here or there, but in the grand scheme, these are definitely outside the regular work hours when these meetings. Attendance is voluntary. Does anyone have to come to these meetings? No. I could almost sort of stop right there. They're voluntary. Folks that want to come, that are bus drivers, that serve our school district, are welcome. We have upwards of 300 or so or more, and Jim Bob could correct me, but somewhere in that range, and approximately 100 at different times here or there would like to do an extra trip. Anybody is welcome. Anybody can come and participate. And what you find out is if you can't come because you're doing another activity for the district, or if you have a legal commitment, your court, your jury duty, you can have what's referred to proxy. And that is any other member who wants to speak on your behalf could do so. And then when Kevin heard this, he even put in there, look, if you just email the administration, we'll get your request in. So there's a good system to go forward in that regard. If you'll turn the page, if you look at the factors a little bit more, you see on page 3 and 5, which is noted 9 in the record, the number 1, the factors that were considered here by our level 1 hearing officer, Mr. Moore, the attendance were voluntary, employees are free to walk out, and we actually give you cases and support for that in position 1 in the letter. And there's the information about proxy in item 2, and if you go down to item 5, it's not required to maintain your employment. You don't get dissed or challenged, or your evaluation is not impacted. These are extra jobs. If you don't want to take an extra job, you're not directed to do so. You're not required to do so. If you'd like to be considered one, there's a system in place that actually, they mentioned seniority. It actually builds in seniority. They start the first meeting of the year. The top person at the list is the most senior bus driver. They get to choose first. They just don't get to choose first every time. They go through and be fair to everybody down the list. And then it rolls back again by seniority. So you're not required, you're not punished if you elect not to come. So there's fairness and transparency. So when you talk about the third factor, which is that it's not directly related to your job, if you look in addressing that issue, if you turn over to page 10 of the record book, which is 4 or 5 of the decision, note in item 14, with respect to the third element, case law is clear that training directly related to the employee's job, if it's designed to make the employee handle his or her job more effectively. In other words, it's related to your job for the purposes of this element, is at the meeting, we're training you how to do your job better. We're doing things in the meeting that are related to your regular job. This meeting has nothing to do with their regular duties and responsibilities. This is all extra. These are extra duties and things. And along that sort of flows even also to additional comments about, in 12, you can see, item 12 there's no direct relationship to the ability to perform your job. The nurse case that's referenced, that was a case about nurses who were volunteering to do exactly what their job was. They were asked to teach child care classes or volunteer to do blood pressure type things. In other words, the things that were their job. And the issue was, hey, that's what they do. That's their job. This meeting is not their job. They're not driving a bus during this meeting. They're not learning how to clean the bus or good safety provisions for kiddos. This is assembling a group of folks who would like a new job, a new duty, and make some more money. And we've got a system put in place so everybody gets a shot, everybody sees it. There's no, you favor this person and you pick that person. It is straight up as can be, and it is extra. It is not required. It's an opportunity. That's why they call it an opportunity meeting. It is different than driving a bus. Fundamentally different. And that goes to that last factor. They don't perform any productive work during such attendance. They don't. There's no bus driving going on during these meetings. It really comes down to an effort by our administration to have a systematic approach that's fair to everyone on a volunteer basis so folks can get extra income and do an extra duty. We're not obligated by law to pay for you to apply. No one goes to an interview and says, will you pay me for this interview? We'd like to be paid. You don't get paid for the interview. You get paid when you get the job and you deliver the service. And as they said, this is coveted, this is desired. The primary beneficiaries of this effort are our employees that want it, that want extra hours, that want to earn extra income. And so they're the primary beneficiaries of this system. They also benefit of the response because of the fairness and transparency. Again, if they were to find and take their argument and said, oh no, we got to pay, the administration could simply in these budget times say, and I tell you what, we'll just handle that ourselves. We'll just let you know who gets assigned. And that, board members, would actually be perfectly legal. This was done as a benefit to all of our bus drivers and is maintained in that fashion. And we would respectfully request that you uphold the level 2 and allow a system that is actually working. When we went back temporarily to kind of the old system, when we were trying to put everything on pause and analyze the legal issues, etc., we discovered significant feedback from several bus members who say, why are you changing this? This is the most fair we've ever seen. We like this a lot. And I couldn't call them by name. I don't know who they are, but I guess we could bring them. But I have Mr. Jacobs here who could testify. Is that correct? The board, that they like the system, and several people came to you?
Yes.
So by our administration, we're meeting a need. We understand some of the concerns. We balance them as best we can. And we respectfully request you uphold the level 2 decision. Thank you, board members.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgins. Ms. Moore, you may make any closing or rebuttal remarks at this time, and you have 5 minutes. And again, Mr. Bailey will be our timekeeper, and he'll let you know when you have 1 minute left.
Thank you. Mr. Hodgins raises interesting points. And I'm sure you could find some bus drivers that say, hey, the system works fine. But I have a bus driver sitting right here, and she knows others who don't like the current system in place. And it's not an issue of whether or not you like it or don't like it. It's whether or not it's in violation of the law. And it is. One of the things that we have gone back and forth with, both opposing counsel and I will say the meetings have been very friendly. It hasn't been very adversarial. We just have a difference of opinion. And of all the cases that the administration has presented, I don't see a case in there about field trips in school districts and bus drivers. Those are, and a lot of the cases aren't even in our circuit. It's of course federal cases all over. But I haven't seen a specific case that they've presented that says this is what happens in cases of field trips and bus drivers. And at TSTA, the state chapter of PEA, we get calls from school districts across the state. And I am here because this school district is not paying their bus drivers. And one of the things is that the school district controls the meeting. They are in control of what route is given, how many hours are there, everything is controlled by the school district. It is not voluntary. We can even go back to the regulations on page 137, and special situations, 785.31 says, voluntary attendance by an employee at such courses or these things outside of working hours would not be hours worked even if they are directly related to his job or paid for by the employer. But one of the issues that we have here regarding voluntary is that, just as he stated, these are coveted. Bus drivers are not being paid a lot of money. I'm just saying it frankly. And so when you have a field trip and you say, hey, you normally make this much a year, but we have an opportunity for you to make a little bit more money, except you have to be present. If you can't be present, I'm sorry, you're just out of luck. And the only time you can have someone to take their place is if you're working. And remember, he said the hours are early in the morning or in the afternoon, so you're not even getting the full 8 hours during the day. And so you're limiting the ability of a person who's not making a lot of money, but who works very, very hard. You're limiting their ability to get more. Now, one of the things that's been told is that many of our bus drivers, and I have a representative here, the process of going up and having it open and transparent is fine. But why would you pay them? This is not a 9-hour meeting. These meetings last from 1 hour to the longest is 3.5 hours. If you go by the hourly rate of a bus driver, why can't you pay them for that 1 hour? I'm concerned if the budget of the transportation department is at a point where they cannot do that. Now, we have not seen documentation by the administration of financially why they couldn't afford to do it. Instead, we go back and forth as to whether or not it's a violation of the law based on our interpretations. Well, we believe it is a violation. And the Department of Labor does have financial penalties for employers who make willful violations of the Fair Labor and Standards Act. And we can go through all the cases that they've listed, but show me one that talks about a school district and field trips for employees. But if we look at the factors, the difference between the job interview and a field trip is when the employer is a beneficiary of my services. What happens if the transportation department doesn't have any bus drivers? What would they do? They would likely go to an outside company and contract for additional drivers because the field trip requests will keep coming. But they don't want to pay the employees who have already passed criminal background checks. They already have a rapport with the district. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
They already have a rapport with the district. They just want 2 more hours, 1 more hour of driving. And I think that if this is something directly related to their employment, they've made themselves available, they should be compensated. And they have not shown where in their budget they can't afford to do it. Now, this is not something, they're not asking for a year's pay, not asking for 6 months' pay. It's just being paid whenever they show up for a meeting for a benefit that benefits both the district and the employee. And I simply say that our remedy is what we've requested before. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hodgins, you may make closing or rebuttal remarks at this time. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President, board members. We are not in violation of the law, in our opinion. I'll concur that there's not a specific case, some point, that she can't point to one either that says that we're wrong. When you apply the cases that are there, it shows that this is a voluntary meeting. It shows that it's outside their work hours. It shows that we're not doing things in the meeting about their own training and driving a bus. This is, once again, akin to an application or a job interview. If you want extra money and you want an extra duty, this is the application process for that. We do not pay folks for applying. We do not pay folks for interviewing. We pay them for providing the service that is commensable, which is getting delivering the job. And that is the fundamental distinction here. This is a volunteer system that, again, we could replace just by our own accord, but different people can come, and they can come under and they meet the requirements, and it has worked. There have been multiple bus drivers consistently coming to these meetings and being fairly treated and getting opportunity and driving our buses, and we are thankful for that. And the feedback that we have is we are also thankful for a system that these gentlemen spent a lot of time in consultation with a lot of folks putting together that meets the need. It's not required to be paid because it's a voluntary application process. And we would request respectfully that you uphold the level 2 decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgins. The complainant has completed their presentation and the administration has responded. Although not required, are there any questions of either party by any board member?
I have one.
Okay, Mr. Kendrick.
Mr. Jacob, based on the transparency that you set up for volunteers, you did, and it's more indicated that sometimes you have bus drivers that have routes that bring them in at 9:15 or later that can or may not can make the meeting. I assume that is not consistent as far as being able for them to come back and bid, or is that true?
They can get a proxy to make their choices for them. They leave a list of the trips,
okay,
and a proxy can choose for them. If they come in and the meeting's already started, then they can step in and join and replace their proxy and then pick their own at that point.
Okay, what about emails? They can get a proxy or make their bid by email?
They can send us the trips that they're interested in, and then we have a proxy take those from their list. But they have
the proxy has to make it from their email?
From their list, yes.
Okay.
But if I remember, the administration also, Mr. Kendrick, if they received that, I couldn't find someone at the meeting to speak for me, these are the ones I want, will you address the proxy issue? The administration agrees and does that.
Right.
So you would do it for them?
We will get a proxy for them.
Okay. I also would take a little bit of exception that willful violation, this district does not do anything willfully that's violating the law that we know of. And I don't think our history shows that we ever have. So I'd have a problem with that willful violation. But thank you very much.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Mr. Roberts?
How many people show up at the, Jim Bob, how many,
At the meeting,
yeah,
I have about 107 members that have agreed to do field trips. Typically, around 60 or so show up for the meetings. And then we have, quite a few that are on trips or doing field trips or have routes that have proxies choose for them.
and so if I'm right, what happens is these individuals go, and depending on their seniority or the time, I guess their seniority is based on time they've been with the district or time they've been driving one of the vehicles, or
How long they've been with the district?
How long they've been-
With the department.
okay. And so when you, let's say, roll out theoretically a trip for Pasadena High School to, well, they don't have Astroworld anymore, to the NRG Stadium or something to that effect, the person at the top or the most seniority can bid on that.
When we have our first meeting of the year, it's based on seniority.
Okay.
Wherever we leave off on this week, the next person in line will get first pick the next week.
Okay.
We just pick up where we leave off each.
But so what could happen is that individual, the top of the totem pole, gets what they request, and it goes down to the next one. Now, so that job could be that the next job could be that week, or it could be the following week. Is that correct?
We bid on, every Wednesday, we bid on all the trips that are the following week.
Following week.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're posted on Mondays, so that everybody has time to view and select which trips they're interested in, so that on Wednesday, they already know all the trips that are available.
And if, let's say, the number 2 person wasn't there on that week, then the third person would get it, correct?
Yes, have the opportunity.
And so it just
to
keeps
pick.
rolling around.
Right,
Okay.
and they can pick any trip that's on there fitting the time restraints.
Okay. And you've got how many bus drivers? Is that normally what you're talking about as far as rollouts of buses?
It's just drivers that we're dealing with in the
Right,
field
okay,
trips.
but how many total do you have? How many
Total
bus
bus
drivers
drivers?
do you have?
Probably close to 200 maybe, because we have monitors as well.
And so about 50% of them show up to this meeting?
Not that many, but we have about 50% maybe that want to do the field trips, but again,
Right.
attendance-wise, we're looking at somewhere around 60
Oh, okay.
that are actually
Okay,
present.
okay, that's what they agree with. You made an interesting point that I was paying attention to you. Why the remedy for the school district would be to reimburse the PEA people? Why not? Are all the bus drivers PEA members, or just some of them?
It's to reimburse all the.
Right, but I mean, a while ago, what I heard was that our remedy is to reimburse the PEA individuals. There were 2 remedies, and they were all just directly related to PEA. So, do you want to change that and say all the drivers, or is it just your remedy is just the PEA members? And you can look at your notes if you want to, see
Sure.
if I heard it wrong.
Mainly the remedy was because I represent PEA. So I can't speak for all the bus drivers in the
Okay.
department.
Okay.
So the remedy will be that way. But although we are requesting it, it will likely be something that would affect the entire bus department, because I'm sure, how can you reimburse one group and not?
Well, that's what I was wondering, is when you said to reimburse just the PEA members. I don't know how the school district, you'd really be asking for another hearing if you did that.
But I
And so-
think we would first have to overcome the hurdle of whether or not they will be reimbursed.
Right. And the meetings are volunteer, correct? Okay. Have you missed any meetings?
Yes, sir.
How many have we had this year?
How many weeks have
What
we
week are we in?
worked?
Man, I don't know how many meetings I've been in.
Every week of the school year except for Harvey.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I have had to miss some of the meetings.
Mhm.
One, recently,
because at the last minute, I volunteered to do a shuttle. So I'm frantically in between sitting and waiting, trying to find somebody at the meeting to text them what I wanted for trips to see if they could get it within the time constraints that's set up for each round, because the trip meetings normally will go at least 3 rounds, sometimes 5 or 6, depending upon how many trips we have. In the first 2 rounds, you're not allowed to go over 40 hours. The third round, you're allowed up to 45 hours, and then 5-hour increments after that. So I was able to get a proxy to do that for me. Now, I have had to miss a meeting because I was ill and wanted to go to the doctor to get well instead of spreading my germs.
Sure.
And I'm not allowed to get a proxy because of that.
You're not allowed to get a proxy if you're ill?
Correct. If you're off, if you do not attend the meeting and you are not currently on the clock doing some other school district job, you are not allowed to have a proxy, except, I think you said for jury duty or legal purposes, correct.
Okay.
So if I'm at the doctor or I go home and attend to my mother, which is now living with me.
Lucky you.
Yes. Or, I have errands to do, I'm not allowed to have a proxy. So I'm off the clock and not allowed to have a proxy.
Okay.
But if I'm on the clock, I'm allowed to have a proxy.
If you're on the clock, in other words, you work that day.
Well, during the trip meeting time,
Yeah.
if I'm currently on the bus driving children or working in the shop or a leader utility driver that's doing other job functions that's required of them, then I can have a proxy. But if I choose to go eat or something else and I'm not on the clock doing school district work, I'm not allowed a proxy.
But I was thinking,
What's everybody doing?
correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that when you come in, they check in, because that's how you know the bus has made it back. One of the reasons, that's what I understand. So you check in your bus, and then the meeting's after that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're not on the clock at that time, are you?
That's correct.
Okay, all right, okay. I don't have any more questions.
Anybody else have any questions? I guess I have a question. So are you asking, what happens if you have a proxy? Are you asking that proxy to be paid for the bus driver's place? You say that you want anybody that's in attendance to be paid. Are you asking if they get a proxy there, is the proxy to receive that compensation? It wouldn't be the bus driver. Bus driver would not be in attendance.
I think that the problem that you have there is that based on the criteria of a proxy, the bus driver is being paid. That's why they have a proxy, that's why they're allowed to have a proxy there. So
I don't see how that's fair, but
That's one of the other problems I have with it.
But my grievance was talking about the bus drivers that the whole point is that the meeting is directly related to what they do. And that if a bus driver has to clock out, and they tell them, clock out, clock out, clock out, and if you have to clock out and you have to be there, then it's not just a voluntary meeting, it's something that you have to be there in order to get the field trip related to the district.
But it is voluntary, because they don't have to apply for that extra trip.
If you say voluntary is defined under the regulations, it's not like what we would say would be voluntary. And voluntary is not voluntary under the regulations if you are adversely affected by your non-attendance. And if you're not present and you don't have a proxy, you don't get paid. You are financially directly.
But there are so many ways to get a proxy. You know, they've outlined all the ways that proxies can be gotten. I think administration has worked diligently to try and make this a fair and equitable process. It's my understanding, the people that I've heard from say that it is much more fair than it ever was before, because it's not just the top of the list that always gets the first jobs. everybody gets a chance. That rolling list enables everybody to get a chance. Another question I had, in your presentation, you talked about the employees compensated while attending the field trips, while the meetings. Those are employees that they're not bidding for those positions. So of course they would be paid. They're taking notes, they're helping with the lineup of the jobs and everything else. Those people would normally get paid. And they probably are 8-hour employees, these people that we're talking about, correct?
Yes, their job duties are the entire day for all things, including those meetings.
Anybody else have any questions?
Essentially, based on what you said, Mr. Jacobs, was you have 50% of your drivers that go on overtime.
Yes.
In that range, 50 to 60 depend. So it's voluntary. If you want to make it, here it is.
Yes, sir.
And I like the idea because I know years and years and years ago we had a problem because we weren't following overtime, and we had one man that finally had to leave the district because he was garnering all the overtime. And you remember that. But that sounds like a fair system because you may be number one now, but you got to get back down here and start over to get back, so everybody gets the same chance. I think that's a fair deal.
And I'm Vicki Morgan, that's Mr. Kendrick. I'm sorry, I know that you need that. Ms. Kiana has a question.
The only thing I see is that you mentioned that you didn't make a meeting or you couldn't, and you were kind of scouring to find a proxy because you had volunteered for a shuttle route. Ultimately, you had a choice to either be there and pick up a volunteer field trip or get a volunteer shuttle that day, of which neither job was a requirement. That was your decision to do. That's correct?
Yes, ma'am. But, the shuttle that I did, they had called out on the radio, I believe, 3 to 4 times, trying to get anybody to cover it. And I knew I would be able to cover it. And I was just like, well, I still need to try and get some field trips as well. And during that meeting, I was able to get a 2.5 or 3 hour field trip for that week.
Ultimately, it's a choice. What works best for the individual.
Talk so that she can hear you.
Ultimately, it's just a choice, what works best for that individual at that time.
Any other questions before we finish the discussion? The complainant has completed, wait a minute, I've already done this. The board, without objection from either party, would now like to deliberate off the record on these issues along with the board's legal counsel. Any vote on the complaint, of course, must be taken in open session. Hearing no objection, we will now go off the record to deliberate.